I made the same Barbarian in Pathfinder 2e and D&D 5e, and here is how it went. Howdy, my name is Nonat, and before we get started, I do want to be completely transparent. I stole this video idea. I know. I did not come up with the idea for this video by myself. I in fact stole it from SetXEX, who did this at this point months ago. And as a way of saying thank you for giving me the idea, I will be linking their original video down in the description if I can find it. I feel like I went looking for it like a few weeks ago and I couldn't find it, but I'll do my best to do so and get it in the description. Also, for the first time in a few weeks, AJ's back. Hi, AJ. What did you just say?
Pocket sand. Ah!
So let's get into the meat here. Like the title says, I am going to be making the exact same character as close as possible in both the Pathfinder 2nd edition system and the D&D 5th edition system. I'm going to be going point by point through character creation, hopping back and forth between each system, and I'm only going to be sticking to D&D's player handbook and Pathfinder 2e's core rulebook. Also, to avoid any confusion, there will be a picture in either corner of the video depending on which system I'm talking about currently. I'm going to follow the same structure of character creation for both systems, namely Pathfinder's ABCs of character creation, Ancestry, Background, Class. Just for D&D, remember that it's not called Ancestry, it's called Race. Right away, we see a major change in how we're going to be building this character. You see, in Pathfinder 2e, the choices you make actually affect your ability scores, but for the sake of simplicity and uniformity, we're going to be going with D&D 5e's standard array. That is the 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 array of stats for your starting ability scores, whereas in Pathfinder 2e, everything is going to start as a flat 10 and change as we make choices. Since we're making a Barbarian, we're going to go ahead and pick an Ancestry and race that is complementary to the class, so let's go with a classic, the Half-Orc Barbarian. In D&D 5th edition, being a half-orc gives us a +2 to Strength and a +1 to Constitution, giving us a stat array that looks something like this. And yes, I did put my 14 in Charisma. Just because we're a half-orc Barbarian doesn't mean we can't be beautiful. Plus, thanks to being a half-orc, we are proficient in Intimidation, which our Charisma stat will be incredibly useful for. Also coming from half-orc is our ability to survive 1 lethal blow per day, as well as dealing an entire extra damage die on critical hits. All great stuff for a Barbarian. Over in Pathfinder, once again, things are drastically different because half-orc is not a playable ancestry on its own. You actually have to use the half-ancestry rules, meaning we could be a half-gnome, half-orc, or a half-elf, half-orc, but for the sake of keeping it simple, we are going to be a half-human, half-orc. Since we're a human, we start with 8 hit points, and we can increase any 2 ability scores by +2. To keep things in line with a D&D character, let's go ahead and increase Strength and Constitution both by 2. We also get Dark Vision, something that humans don't normally have, but because we are a half-orc, we gain that feature. Our last decision we have to make is our level 1 Ancestry feat, and because we are half-human, half-orc, we can actually pick from any human, orc, and half-orc Ancestry feat that we want. But to keep things concise and similar between the games, let's take Orc Ferocity, which as a reaction lets us survive a downing blow while staying up with 1 hit point, just like D&D's Relentless Endurance. Alright, with our Ancestry out of the way, let's say our D&D Barbarian learned how to hold their own and please the crowd by fighting in the arena as a gladiator. This is a variant of the Entertainer background in 5e. This gives us proficiency in acrobatics as well as performance, plus proficiency in using the disguise kit. We start with 15 gold, a costume, and an interesting but unusual weapon of our choice. This is specifically because we picked Gladiator, so let's go ahead and give our Barbarian a trident, which is the weapon the book recommends for a gladiator. Now in Pathfinder, our background affects a little bit more. It does give us skill proficiencies, but it also affects our ability boosts, as well as gives us a free skill feat depending on the background we choose. Starting with the 2 boosts, one of them does have to be to Strength or Charisma because we are once again picking Gladiator, and one of the boosts can go to any skill we want. So let's put +2 into Charisma and then put our free +2 into Strength. We become trained in performance and also trained in gladiatorial lore, plus we get the impressive performance skill feat. This basically lets us use performance to make an impression on people instead of diplomacy, meaning we can forego diplomacy as a skill proficiency because half the time we can rely on performance anyway. Now that the easy stuff is behind us, let's move on to the meat of the video, the class. I'm going to be dividing the class into 3 sections all on its own. Basic features, subclasses, and level 20. Let's start off with the basic features of the D&D Barbarian, and I'm counting anything you get by 3rd level as a basic feature of the Barbarian. Barbarians have 1d12 hit points per level, can wear light and medium armor, and can wield shields. I still feel weird that Barbarians are so good with shields in 5e. I don't know why, I guess because I always see them as relentless attackers. Is that just me? They're also proficient in strength and constitution saving throws and get 2 skill proficiencies of their choice. At level 3, a Barbarian has 5 main class features going for them. The first one being their obvious Barbarian Rage, giving them a ton of bonuses in this system. Advantage on all strength checks and strength saves, a flat damage bonus to all of their attacks as they level up, and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And remember, in 5th edition, resistance just cuts damage in half. This makes the Barbarian's Rage, especially from like levels 1 to 5 when you're not facing a ton of magic, that physical resistance is insane. The Rage also only lasts for a maximum of 1 minute. Barbarians also get unarmored defense, meaning if they are not wearing any armor whatsoever, they get to add their constitution modifier to their armor class, meaning their base armor class becomes 10 plus dexterity plus constitution. This means if you're holding a shield, your Barbarian's armor class can be pretty insane at level 1 at the cost of only using a one-handed weapon. At 2nd level, Barbarians get Reckless Attack, which is one of my favorite little gambles. You give yourself advantage on all of your attacks that turn, but all attacks against you until the start of your next turn also get advantage. So this can be really fun, a really good way to try to end the battle early, but if the enemies live, you might be screwed. Unless you have a crazy armor class, in which case you might be fine anyway. Barbarians also get Danger Sense, giving them a bonus to saving throws against traps and other visible hazards that they can see coming. And I didn't realize it until writing the script for this video, but Barbarians in D&D 5e are crazy multiple ability dependent, or MAD.
That's my secret, Cat. I'm always angry.
They need strength for their attack rolls and damage. They need dexterity for their danger sense bonus and to the armor class. They need constitution for their armor class and also for the raw hit points they give. And then if you want to do anything with intimidation, you need charisma. That's 4 ability scores that are all important to the same class. Even more counterintuitive, some of their features just flat out don't work with dexterity-based weapons. So it's not like you can make a super dexterity-focused Barbarian with a 17 or 18 dexterity, because then your Rage feature isn't going to work as well. Now, over in Pathfinder 2nd edition, Barbarians are actually a little bit simpler at low levels. They're still proficient in light armor, medium armor, and no armor. They can use simple and martial weapons. But in Pathfinder 2e, Barbarians do not get any inherent bonus from being unarmored, so 9 times out of 10, you're going to be wanting to wear that medium armor to keep your armor class up to snuff. Again, unless you want to invest into dexterity, which, just like D&D, doesn't work that great for a PF2 Barbarian. Barbarians in PF2 have some great starting saving throws, being expert in both fortitude and will saves, and if you're not sure what that means, most people start trained in a saving throw, giving them a flat +2, whereas if you're expert, you get +4, a really big difference at low levels. They start with expert proficiency in perception, they get trained in athletics, and then 3 plus their intelligence in additional skill proficiencies of their choice. Already at level 1, we can see a really big difference between the D&D and Pathfinder Barbarians. While D&D sort of wants you to balance strength, dexterity, and constitution, Pathfinder really is just pushing that max strength Barbarian, maybe with some constitution to bump up your hit points and fortitude saves. Otherwise, dexterity doesn't do a whole lot for them. A 12 or a 14 dexterity might complement your medium armor, which lets you add some dexterity to your armor class, but overall, it's not super mandatory. While raging, the Pathfinder 2 Barbarian does deal a flat 2 bonus damage, which will get augmented by your subclass, and if you're using an agile weapon, basically attacking using dexterity, this bonus damage is halved, which once again means the Barbarian doesn't really want to use dexterity as their main combat stat. Also while raging, the PF2 Barbarian takes a -1 to armor class, however they do get a good chunk of temporary hit points equal to their level plus their constitution modifier. It's really interesting to analyze the different design philosophies when it comes to the Barbarian's rage. Over in D&D 5e, it is pretty much exclusively positive. Bonus damage, advantage on strength checks, resistance to all physical damage. The only negative aspect is that you can't concentrate or cast spells. Meanwhile, Pathfinder's Barbarian Rage is a little bit more situational. It is not the answer to every single fight. Sure, you get bonus damage and temporary hit points, but you become slightly more vulnerable to getting hit, and in Pathfinder 2e's case, getting critically hit because of the lowered armor class. You also can't use any action that requires concentrate, which might just sound like spellcasting at first, but you'll realize playing PF2 that there are some actions out there that require concentrate that you don't even realize until it comes up. This might make it sound like Pathfinder's Barbarian Rage is inherently weaker than Dungeons & Dragons, but that's not entirely true. It'll make more sense once we get to the subclasses. The only other basic of the level 1 PF2 Barbarian is that they do get to start with a level 1 feat, which obviously I'm not going to go over all the feats here. Click the link in the corner of the video, whichever one it is, where I do go over all the feats if you want to see those. But overall, the level 1 feats for the PF2 Barbarian are pretty underwhelming. It's things like rage damage to thrown weapons, or being able to concentrate for a couple seconds while raging. Let's move on to the subclasses of these barbarians, and there's no perfect parallel between the two systems, as they both have completely different subclasses, so I'm going to be picking the two closest subclasses, and that is the Totem Spirit Barbarian for 5th edition, and the Animal Instinct Barbarian for PF2. Both of these options revolve around picking a specific animal and utilizing aspects of that animal to empower your rage. We'll be picking the Wolf as the animal for both of these barbarians. Starting with 5th edition, the Wolf Totem Barbarian can speak with animals as a ritual and also gains beast sense, and while raging, your friends? Not your allies! Your friends gain advantage on attack rolls. I have never seen this before. I'm pretty sure it's just a typo because it's the only place in the player handbook this shows up, but I find it hilarious that this says your friends get advantage on attack rolls against enemies you're adjacent to. So like if you're working with someone that you don't like they're your ally but they're not your friend, they don't get advantage. At level 6, the D&D Barbarian has two options. They can either pick another animal, or they can get an advanced trait from their current animal. So for the sake of simplicity, we'll go for the advanced trait of the Wolf, which lets you track and sneak at full speed while traveling. This is the kind of thing that's sort of useful if you go off on your own and split from the party for a little bit, or maybe move ahead of the party while tracking somebody, but when you're moving in a group, and the movement speed is based on the slowest character in the party, this doesn't really help that much. At level 10, they can cast Commune with Nature as a ritual spell, and at level 14, they can knock enemies prone as a bonus action, which is really good and makes it a lot harder for enemies to run away. I really like the Totem Spirit subclass in 5th edition because it doesn't just give you more damage. Rather, it gives you some unique, flavorful, situational abilities you can pull out when you need them, rather than just saying you hit harder. The Wolf Animal Instinct Barbarian in Pathfinder 2nd edition is honestly completely different. Where the D&D Barbarian learns to fight like their chosen animal, the Pathfinder Barbarian actually partially shapeshifts into their chosen animal. Thanks to the Bestial Rage feature, whenever your PF2 Barbarian goes into a rage, part of their body shapeshifts to give you a new unarmed attack based on your chosen animal. Since we chose Wolf, we get a 1d10 unarmed Jaws strike, meaning your character probably gains a wolf mouth to bite with while raging. Additionally, Animal Instinct Barbarians in PF2 are not allowed to use weapons while raging, because while raging they are embracing nature and mimicking nature. Weapons are not natural. You are not allowed to use those weapons, and I think that's a crazy cool, flavorful anathema for a barbarian to have. They start with the +2 flat damage while raging, and at character level 7 it increases to 5 bonus flat damage, and at character level 15 it becomes 12 bonus flat damage to all attacks. Also, while the D&D Barbarian starts with resistance, the PF2 Barbarian doesn't get it until level 9, and they only get it against specific damage types based on their subclass. Also, resistance is a lot weaker in Pathfinder 2e, as resistance only reduces damage by a set number, not by half like D&D. The Animal Instinct resists piercing and slashing damage and reduces the damage by 3 plus their Constitution modifier, which at level 9 is probably a +4, so you're reducing all of that damage by 7. It would be unfair to compare the two barbarians without allowing the PF2 Barbarian to use their Barbarian subclass specific feats, like the Animal Skin feat at level 6. This feat increases their unarmored proficiency to Expert way earlier than they would normally get it. It also grants them a flat +2 item bonus as if they were wearing armor while unarmored. This is a massive defensive buff for the Animal Instinct Barbarian, because normally barbarians do not get expert proficiency until level 13, but Animal Instinct can get this at level 6. At level 8, the PF2 Barbarian can also completely shapeshift into their animal, in our case a wolf, gaining a 40-foot movement speed, and at level 12 they can take the Predator's Pounce feat, allowing them to move and attack for one action. So, we've talked about the basic features, we've talked about the subclasses. What does level 20 look like for each of these characters? Well, let's talk about their capstone. In D&D, the Barbarian just gets +4 strength, +4 Constitution. That's crazy. That affects so much on your character sheet, that affects your hit points, that affects your saving throws, that affects your damage, that affects your accuracy. Overall, it increases their consistency, it increases their average output. It is just a massive flat buff. The Pathfinder capstone is definitely less exciting, allowing them to ignore 10 points of damage resistance of their targets whenever they attack, but they do also get access to high-level feats like Quaking Stomp, which is just the Earthquake spell on a 10-minute recharge. Equipment-wise, because of Pathfinder's Animal Skin feat, I think both of these characters ended up being completely unarmored, with some extra magic items to bump up their armor class even more, definitely a magic weapon, and probably a unique item here or there to increase their damage. Gameplay-wise, they're also incredibly similar. Run into the fray, rage, and deal damage. Obviously in D&D, I'm trying to stay as close to my friends as possible to give them advantage on attack rolls against my target, while in PF2 I'm definitely darting around the battlefield a lot more with Predator's Pounce to move and strike and move and strike, preferably getting into flanking position as often as possible. Now, let's get to the part of the video that might make people upset. My opinion. Because I believe there are a few designs in both systems that I think are subjectively better than the other. And as a reminder, subjectively means only to me. It doesn't mean it has to be the same for you. For example, I think D&D giving all barbarians brutal critical as a class feature is amazing design. Barbarians are there to hit for as high of a single number as possible, and giving them extra damage die on their critical hits is such good class identity. Meanwhile, Pathfinder 2e decided that one extra damage die on a critical hit should be a level 18 feat. Granted, it also inflicts bleed damage, but it's still level 18. It just doesn't feel as good as the D&D Barbarian, who slowly gets even more dice on their critical hits as they raise in level. It's super cool. On the flip side, I think D&D limiting your number of rages per day doesn't feel good mechanically. I suppose I can understand it from a flavor standpoint, you start to exhaust yourself, but I really prefer Pathfinder's 1 minute cooldown between rages. You can't rage all the time, but as long as you take that breather after your rage, you can go into it again. Playing in D&D 5e and feeling like I need to conserve my rage for when I might tactically need to rage later feels totally antithetical to the class that wants to run in, get mad, and hit stuff. Which is what I can do in Pathfinder 2e. I see a fight, I get mad, I run in, I hit stuff. It feels great and I don't have to worry about not having it later. As different as the designs seem in theory, they play incredibly similar, and I would be happy to play either of these classes in their respective game. The main difference is that the Pathfinder Animal Barbarian really wants to run around and jump between people on the battlefield, whereas D&D really just wants to find that perfect position where they're adjacent to as many enemies as possible and stay there so their friends gain advantage on all their attack rolls. But, at the end of the day, these are just two of dozens of different types of barbarians you can make in each system. While I don't think there will ever be an exact one-to-one translation of a 5th edition class to a 2nd edition Pathfinder class, I think we can find some similarities in the design, especially in cases like this with two characters that are so similar. But even when they are this similar, they're still really different on paper and in practice, and of course they're going to be completely different depending on who is playing them. I feel like I learned a ton about design, the similarities and differences between the two systems, and just what goes into making a class unique in your given system. And I hope you learned something too. If you want to see more videos like this, please leave a like on the video. It helps so much to help push the video out in front of more eyes. Leave a comment talking about if I got anything wrong, if I missed anything, if you have ideas for another video like this where I make two characters of the same type in both systems, because I had a lot of fun writing this and recording this. I think this could be a really fun series if you guys want to see more. So if you do, let me know, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate y'all so much. AJ, I appreciate you editing. Thanks, doll. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.